first step in aligning a vise is to ensure that the table is clean, exempt of damage, and ready to receive the vise. Once we know that the table is ready, we can move on to the vise itself and verify its bottom side. We want to make sure again that it is clean, exempt of damage, and ready to be deposited on the milling machine's table. We can now delicately deposit the milling vise on the milling machine's table and insert and hand tighten only at this stage the two T-nuts that will hold the vise down. Hand tighten only at this point. And now with a wrench we can tighten just lightly only one of the two screws. That lightly tightened screw is going to become a pivot point and make the alignment process a lot simpler. In this trade, it's very rare that we can go from completely cockeyed to well aligned in one foul swoop. Normally, operations such as alignment or centering or edge finding require a progression or a series of operations that will progressively increase our precision. In the steps that we have to follow, the first step for aligning a vise is going to be visual, and it's called sighting. And for that we're going to use, backing up a little bit, one eye to line up the edge of the fixed jaw of this vise. That's very important. We want to align the fixed jaw. The movable jaw is useless for alignment. So by eye, we want to align the fixed jaw of the vise with one of the T-slots on the table. And that'll bring us closer to being aligned, and that will make the accurate alignment a lot easier a little later on. It's kind of useless to push and pull on a heavy object for positioning, especially around a pivot point. It would be a lot more productive to use a positioning hammer, or as we are in this case, a dead blow hammer, to tap the vise lightly and progressively bring it to the desired position. This technique gives you a lot of control about how much you pivot your vise around that pivot point. So, push no, tap yes. So let's start by the visual alignment. And from a distance of about 4 or 5 feet, I'm going to use sighting to align the fixed jaw of the vise. And that's very important that it be the fixed jaw. Okay? We're going to align that with one of the T-nut grooves on the table. Now these T-nut grooves are quite parallel to the axis of the table. Now this sighting alignment, the jaw to the T-nut groove, should help us to align ourselves within about 0.010 of an inch. So let's take a look at that. So I will just lightly tap the vise in the direction that I want to move it around my pivot point. Yeah, I'm getting there a little more. Pretty close, a little bit more. Okay, now I should be pretty close to my objective. And now I want to tighten just a little bit more. I need it to be a little more stable, the nut that is holding down my pivot point, because I'm ready to move on to my dial indicator, and I'm going to use that dial indicator up against my fixed jaw, again very important, to align it within 0.010 of an inch. Before we go any further, it's very important that you make certain that the emergency stop button is activated. The last thing you want to do is start the machine with the dial indicator mounted in the spindle. So I can now install my drill chuck and my dial indicator, positioned in a way to have access to the fixed jaw of the vise. That looks just fine. So now we can bring the tip of the dial indicator in contact with the fixed jaw. Now just lightly in contact. We don't want 3 turns of the dial here. A light contact is all that's needed. So as I've said, a light contact, 20 thousandths of an inch is more than enough. And now using the longitudinal feed or the x-axis, I can position the end of my dial indicator on the end or close to the end of the fixed jaw. Once there, I'm going to set the dial on the dial indicator to 0. I can then return towards the other end of the vise jaw to see by just how much I'm out of alignment. I can see that the needle on the dial indicator is moving, and that movement indicates that the vise jaw is moving away from the dial indicator as I progress towards this end. So I'm going to have to adjust the jaw in this direction to bring this corner a little closer to the dial indicator. So now with my dead blow hammer, I'm going to tap and adjust the vise just slightly, and then I'm going to re-swipe the vise jaw to verify if what we're doing is helping. You're going to have to go through these operations as many times as required until you're satisfied with the alignment of your vise. So I'm going to go back to the start of my vise, reset myself to 0, and swipe one last time to verify. Okay, well, I can see that my jaw is aligned over its 6-inch length to well within 1/1000th of an inch, and that is more than accurate enough for the kind of work that we'll be doing in this first semester. Now is the time for the vise's final tightening. Do it progressively. Tighten each nut alternatively a little more until they're both quite tight. Leave the dial indicator in contact with the vise jaw until the very end. That way you can be sure that nothing is moved during the tightening operation. And there you go, a well-aligned vise, the cornerstone of a successful project. And now, clean up. Hey, no one ever said it was going to be exciting. And remember, it should be fun, but it has to be safe. So, happy machining.